The Winnipeg.net User Group 2016 season is brought to you by Aptius, IQ Metrics, Imaginet, Vision Critical, and Microsoft.
Okay. So, welcome everyone to Windows Not Required, the new Microsoft development story. So we're doing our meeting here for the .NET User Group. It's September 28th, in case you didn't know. And for fun, if you want to follow along, does someone want to turn off the big lights and turn up the... Thank you. If you want to follow along, you can follow along at davidwest.github.io/windows-not-required. All these slides are online, is the whole point. You can even fork it yourself and look at the source code afterwards. It's just one big HTML slide deck with some demos woven into it. So afterwards, don't worry about scribbling down a bunch of notes. You can just download it later and give me a bunch of stars on GitHub. So who am I? I'll make this part quick. I'm David West. I'm an application developer for the University of Manitoba. Microsoft MVP. I'm a Western dev. You can find me there. There's my blog. There's my website. It's all good. And it's not rendering very well, is it? Let's try this again. There we go. So, I want to set expectations, bringing back my analyst roots. Let's set expectations with all of you so you know what you're walking into here. The goal here is to take a look at the new world of Microsoft development. I put that in air quotes because Microsoft development has this sort of normal, has this sort of, how would I word it? Stereotype to it, where how many people here have been doing .NET development or have done .NET development for more than, or in the past 10 years? Yeah? So Microsoft has had this developer story where it was every 2 years, someone would come out of a box and be like, this is what you get, and they would just kind of dump all this stuff out onto the table, and this is your development toolkit. Visual Studio came out, a new version of SQL Server came out, so usually a flavor of Windows came out, another version of the .NET framework comes out. All these prescribed solutions come out in this nice box, and now you have to learn them and you upgrade all your systems, and it takes your whole group 2 years to get used to them, and then that same guy comes out of it and just dumps it onto the table again. He's like, here's the next version. You will love this. And then you go, hey Bob, question. I was wondering if you could change this thing about how sucky web forms are. That's great feedback. I'll get back to you in 2 years. And maybe I'll talk about it, but probably not, because we're going to go inside of our little box and talk about how great we are and give you the next best thing. That's kind of the stereotype that came from. And I mean, I come from .NET. That's all my development roots. And the fact of the matter is, it's still recording. Fact of the matter is, the world has evolved in that sense. Development has become way more agile. There's a lot more tools, a lot more competition, and the idea that one of the major quote-unquote platforms has a prescribed solution that's going to work for everything is really unlikely. And to be fair, it never really did fit all of those needs. So the goal is to kind of look at this new world, because it's changed dramatically. There's a lot of crazy stuff Microsoft has been doing, and I want to kind of take a look at that. And the thing I want you to take away is Microsoft software as separate entities that are self-sufficient, independent of one another, but can still provide a key. That's not even a sentence, is it? That's fine. Here's the idea. Microsoft has a big software solution. They always have. Here's your prescribed big solution. That still exists. But you're not hearing anyone talk about here's the next iteration, here's the next big wave of this. What they've done is they've broken up all of that whole big mound of stuff into smaller product groups. And every product group is a unique entity unto itself, trying to make itself really great. And because of that, they're really focused about themselves, but they still integrate with one another, and there's still a whole cohesive story. But now you don't need the whole thing. You just need to take the parts that you want and integrate where you want. And as in a software company, they want to sell you software. Again, wherever you want to use software, Linux, Mac, Windows, we don't care, cloud, here's a thing that you can probably use. And that's their news story, and it's really weird because that's what they've been doing. And in the last 2 years specifically, I'd say they've really gone crazy in that direction. And that's what we're going to kind of see today. We're going to fly over a lot of this stuff at 30,000 feet. We're going to see some demos, see a bunch of weird stuff. And like I said, I'm running this on a Linux machine, which is all kinds of confusing. So we're going to give this a shot. So our plan for tonight, and again, all these things are available online afterwards, or actually right now to be fair. We're going to break it up into 3 areas. We're going to talk about tools. The second area, which is going to be the bulk of it, languages, platforms, and stuff. I didn't really know what to call that one, but it's kind of the big, meaty stuff that Microsoft has been providing, and services at the end. Now, the key thing to note is that everything I'm talking about is cross-platform. I am not needing Windows at all. I'm not using Windows on this laptop. If you have a Mac, if you have some weird variant of Linux that I'm not aware of, you know, it's likely there's some form of support for it in some variety. If you're running Windows, definitely works still, just to be clear. But that being said, it's one of those pieces where we're going to kind of talk about this from let's get rid of the Windows part of it and let's just talk about stuff we can use. Yeah, we're going to go into that, and there's a weird fact that I came across today that just kind of made my brain melt. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Visual Studio Code. Has anyone here downloaded Visual Studio Code? For those of you that haven't raised your hand, I forgive you, because you should have downloaded it by now because it's free and it's amazing. And we're going to do a quick demo of it. Let's get out of full screen mode.
You mean sample code?
Yes. Not really. I mean, Visual Studio Code is the editor.
Oh.
Actually, that's a really good point. I assume that everyone knows, because I'm a web hipster with my web t-shirt on. How many people here know what Visual Studio Code is as a product? Has anyone heard of that?
No.
For those of you that have, that's fine. Because you know what? There's a huge, huge thing that we've been yelling at Microsoft about with respect to the naming convention. Because they just talk about code. That's what they call it. When you install it, it's called, see? Run code. That to me, like, I think some sort of virus checker should be going off right now, just based solely on the description.
Run code, run.
Yeah, run. This can't go wrong. So what this is it's going to show up here in a sec. So this is a 100% cross-platform code editor that is Microsoft supported. So this is really weird. So Visual Studio proper is what I'll call the one that we're all familiar with. It's big. Okay. If you're doing something small, you're just in code. This was the solution that they came up with. Like, we just want a text editor. I want a fancy text editor with some cool little hooks to make my coding experience ideal, but I don't want the TFS integration. I don't want the planning components. I don't want the what's it called? The intelligence debugging where you're hooking it into multiple servers. Visual Studio proper is still a giant product that is fantastic at what it does. This is not that. This is nothing like that. This is a code editor. It helps you with debugging, and it's cross-platform. Now, what does that entail in this? It means it doesn't care what. It doesn't just mean it installs on Mac, Linux, and Windows. It also doesn't care what language you're using. So it doesn't come bundled with anything except for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There's extensions to install for everything else, and that includes C#. So if I do this, you should see it there. So C#, I haven't installed it because I don't write a lot of C# code, but I use this thing. C, C++, Python, Go, name your language. Someone's written support for it. I have a blog post about Java in Visual Studio Code. It is my biggest blog post I've ever written, apparently. I get huge hits on it. Still to this day, I wrote it like 9 months ago. As a thing, I'm like, my job's making me do Java. I'm going to make it Visual Studio related. I'll show you. And then people liked it, so that was weird. But it has all these things built in. It's all free. And the IDE itself is open source. It's all available on GitHub. So it's actually all written in JavaScript, which is, again, a whole weird thing all by itself. But it is Microsoft supported. And we're going to talk a little bit more about open source as we go. This is a really good starting point because open source doesn't, in a traditional sense, and how I've always interpreted it, is it's like, hey, the software is free and out there. Use it if you want, but if it's not working, well, fix it yourself. That's not necessarily the case for this one. Microsoft is investing their own actual resources, like actual Microsoft employees are investing time and committing to a GitHub repository in an open source world. And they're supporting this. So there's an official Microsoft support path for this. So if you are doing something like using this in an enterprise and you have a support contract with Microsoft, you can call them and be like, hey, Visual Studio Code is doing this stupid thing. And they're going to go, Did you customize it? And if you say no, which you should say no, if anyone ever asks you, did you customize it? Always lie to them if you did. Because otherwise they're like, we're sending a guy, he's $1,000 an hour, have a good day, sir. But they do support this. So you can do one of those warranty phone calls and they will help debug the issue. The fact that you can review the source code, that's just how it works. Which is, I gotta say, a strange new Microsoft when that's the thing. Hey, take the ID, look at the source code, and then debug it a little bit. Because you can debug your own instance of Visual Studio Code. So it's really kind of neat in that context. And what else does it come with? Tight Git integration. Has a debugger that's extendable. So you can attach this debugger to the C# compiler and debugger. You can attach this to the Node.js debugger. You can attach this to a Java debugger that I did once because I was, again, bored. But a lot of different pieces go. All these things have the debuggers, and it has real-time stuff like your breakpoints, all this kind of stuff. It also is agnostic in the sense of, if I do Control-Shift-P, see this thing up top there, if I type the word task, it says configure task runner. So this is things like Ant or your build tasks. So if you want to use Ant, Gradle, I guess MS Build is the Microsoft one, Rake, Gulp, Grunt, name your variety of thing. You can weave this in. There's a lot of ones that are supported out of the box, like the big one, Node.js, MS Build. You can just tie these in on a per project basis. But if you want to tie it in like a Java one, they're not worried about Java. So you can tie it in though. And they actually have an extension, which is the newest addition to this, where you can actually see, you can tie in, you can just install a free plugin or a free extension and it will tie in your Java debugger. So again, setting breakpoints, getting error messages, getting that error syntax as you're coming along, like, oh look, I forgot my semicolon, I'm the worst. It's gonna give you that error message real time in your editor. So that's what Visual Studio Code is, and this is kind of the first, this is where I would say is kind of the tipping point when I started to think that Microsoft might be up to something. Because this is weird. This was this weird thing of like, hey, here's a free thing, and it's free, and it's good. Sorry about that. Like, it's just, and not to say that Visual Studio is bad, it's just that it's so big. So when I want to do a single page website, and I don't have my 16 gigs of RAM free, like that's a slow day for one web page, right? Like for enterprise stuff, like I said, Visual Studio proper has its place, and I'm never gonna fault it. I love it for what it does, but this is a code editor through and through. So if you're interested in something like Atom or Brackets or any of those other variants, Notepad++, this is a good variant of that. It's a nice, if you're using Notepad++, I would try this. Even if you're just editing config files, give it a shot. It's free. It works on everything. It's worth giving it a shot. But that's where we're starting. This is one of the big tools they've got now. And it's picking up steam more and more and more as things go on. So, Xamarin. The reason I mentioned the Xamarin Studio is a framework. I want to call it a framework or a platform. Something, the thing. It takes your C# code and compiles it out, compiles those apps into native iOS apps, Android apps, and Windows Phone apps, and a bunch of other varieties. It takes C# code as its input. Microsoft bought them, because that's what they're doing these days. They're just buying the things that are good, and they're like, we're weaving this into how we want to do business. So if you have an MSDN license, you have Xamarin Studio. That counts towards, I think, the student edition, and it also counts towards the regular Pro edition, or whatever it's called. But that means I took a screenshot of Xamarin Studio running on OS X. If you haven't, like, I want to highlight the weird sentence I'm going to say. If you have a Mac, OS X, and for some reason an MSDN, you have development tools from Microsoft. Like, go back 5 years and explain to your boss, or you yourself, say, hey, me, in 5 years, you can write iOS apps in C# on a Mac. And you're going to go, I'm clearly crazy 5 years from now. That's how my life went. Okay. So that's kind of the world they're going with, is like every platform is free game, and they just want to give developers tools to build those things. And that's what Xamarin Studio, so that's a really big highlighted one. They just bought them this year, and they're weaving it in to all their offerings. And we're going to see more and more from Xamarin because it's very popular from the mobile development point of view. So if you're interested in mobile apps, definitely look at Xamarin.
Question.
Yeah.
Is Xamarin free to use as well,
I think you get there's a free edition of it, but again, it comes with your MSDN, so it's free like Visual Studio is kind of free because there's a community edition. I think Xamarin they're working on some variety of that, but the professional edition, which is what has all the really big power, that's the part that usually costs the money. Where if you have access to an MSDN license through work, you have access to a full license of that to tinker with it and stuff.
That means you can deploy apps to Android and iOS?
Yep. Just take C# code and just compiles it, and they have a whole. Xamarin as a company has one of the most interesting test clouds. Actually, it's a service they provide as a mobile device test cloud. They've got something like 12,000 devices like hardwired up, and they can give you screenshots and debug diagnostic information about your Xamarin app in real time, and it's just crazy what they can do. So all of that stuff is there as well. So yeah, good point. This is a little short thing I wanted to add up. Android and iOS apps. This is something that I fell into by accident. So I ditched my Windows phone after Japan, so I was very angry that Tokyo didn't exist. And then got my old Android out that I got for free and just started installing apps. I was like, I don't know what these apps are, but they're popular and they seem to be interesting and they make me more productive. It turns out that they're all Microsoft apps, which is weird. Arrow Launcher, Pix, Wunderlist. Wunderlist was bought by them. Sunrise was also now been woven into Outlook for Android, because Outlook for Android is actually a good version of Outlook, which is, I don't understand. But all these cool things exist on Android. There are also a lot of them are on iOS as well. But they're Microsoft apps on other mobile phones, and most of them are free. But the ones that I would highly recommend looking at, Wunderlist, Office Lens. If you ever have to do a meeting with a whiteboard, Office Lens is a free thing that takes a picture of a whiteboard from any angle. It's such a weird thing. You can stand at the side, it'll figure out where the whiteboard is and what angle you're at, take that picture, and then you'll have the picture of the whiteboard, like in a proper context. It's really messed up. But it's, again, a free app. An Office Remote, if you're doing PowerPoints, it's a free little Office Remote. Again, all Microsoft stuff out there. So watch for your iOS and Android stuff on there, because again, it's just tools to make you more productive, but it's pretty interesting what you can do with it.
There's also one called Microsoft Apps, and it's like a gateway to all those apps that you make.
Oh, really? Well, there you go. So I like how they have see, that's a Microsoft thing too. Let's make an app to show all our apps. It's like, isn't there a store for that? Don't get him out of here. I don't want to hear that guy. But I like that. That's cool. It's an app for the apps. That's nice. There's so many of them. How do you keep track? So let's get to the cool, fun stuff. Languages, platforms, and stuff. So let's talk about that. .NET Core. We're going to do this as a demo. This is where I'm just going to go into demo mode because slides are great until you have to use them, and then it get boring. So let's zoom this in. So I've already installed .NET. Now .NET Core is different than Microsoft .NET. Is everyone familiar with .NET Core? Has it heard of .NET Core? Yes, no. For those that haven't, there's been pretty much, I would call it pretty much a complete rewrite of .NET in the sense that if you want to write .NET code that runs literally anywhere, that's really fast, they've created a new version of .NET just for you. And you can write in C# and F# right now. And it works everywhere, and it's absurdly fast. I can't emphasize how fast this is, because the stuff they're doing with it, they're like, we're going to aim for the Node.js markers, and they're like, everyone's like, you're crazy, we like you, but you're crazy, Scott Hanselman. And now they're like doubled them over. Like I think that when they do set up a custom little web server application, which is what Node.js's Hello World is, they can handle, I think it's 1.6 million requests per minute, just plain text requests. Like, it's nuts. The speed, like Node on a good day is like 800,000. And this is Microsoft going like, we did it, and we're getting faster. And we're like, you just slow it down maybe. I don't know, man. Like, does it need to be that fast? But anyway, so yeah, so .NET Core. So if I want to go in here, so I'm going to go to Windows not required, and I'll go into my demos. Can you all see that? Is that okay? From where you guys are all sitting? Yeah? Okay. So I have the latest version of .NET installed, which again, I come from a Windows background, and that's where I come from, but this is still weird to me, because I'm running Ubuntu, which is Linux, and I just type .NET, that thing happened. I thought it would just melt my computer, or Microsoft would, like, men in suits would come in and be like, what are you doing? Where's your Windows license? So I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, Bill. Anyway, so I do have it installed. So all you do to get this kind of going, I'm just doing kind of like little hello world examples. Again, we've got a lot of stuff to cover. But you go .NET new, and then because I know we're all F# people secretly in the room, here we go. So I did a sloppy job. You see I have my program FS, I have an F# thing. If I do code, that's actually, no, I did something wrong there. That's on my other demos. I created all the content in the wrong folder. So that's just me being bad at my job. But thanks for pointing that out, George, while I'm being recorded. Appreciate it. But yeah, so you see I created a little hello thing here. So hello from Linux. Lots of exclamation marks. WTF has to go in there because I'm on Linux. See, now Amir's gone, so now it's all potty mouth. It's all horrible. Okay, so now we close that. And I do .NET restore. So what it's doing is reading that project.json, and it's actually finding out what my dependencies are, because they're all identified in there, and it's pulling them all in from NuGet and different repository sources. And there we go. So restore completed, and then I do .NET run.
So do you have an executable or just some file image?
That's a great question. I don't actually have an answer for you. We'll take a look here. I think it's actually running something. So there you go. I have a bin folder and an object folder. So when it compiles it, it goes down to the bin folder. So let's see what's in the bin folder. If I debug things, let's go with the object folder. So for Visual Studio people, this should look familiar. I even know that. So we do object.
You might want to try find space dot, and it'll just show you all the files directly.
Find space dot. Oh yeah, but I have all my other crappy demos in there. Oh, now what have I done? Okay, here we go. So you go .NET DLL, PDB. Thank you. I'm learning all this Linux stuff in my Linux talk. I love this. It's so meta. So yeah, so you can see what it's got here: object debug, CoreNet app, .NET compile. It's doing its thing. But caveat to this is, so .NET 1.0 is officially out, released to web, or released to market. 1.01 is coming out very soon. The SDK is still in preview too. You saw the version. I'm running the SDK, so it's still in preview because we're waiting for, I guess, the next iteration of Visual Studio or whatever they're waiting for to just stay stable. And because of this, .NET Core has this thing where they seem to change stuff pretty dramatically. We're talking like bleeding edge. So don't leave here, go to work and be like, let's start converting C# into F# for .NET Core, because you will get fired very fast. This is one of those catches, right? Like, it's bleeding edge, but it is something definitely to watch because it's fast, it's accessible, and again, if you're familiar with C#, you think about where this comes into play. Windows licensing sucks for production environments. It really sucks pretty badly. Windows Server, all that stuff. Now you can take C# code and run it on a Linux box, which has way better licensing options because it's next to nil. Apache is another good example. Want to put it behind an Apache web server? It's not a problem. All that stuff exists now. You can run .NET on the standards that are out there for most of the rest of the web. As Microsoft people, we've lived with IIS and we've lived with Windows Server because that's what we had. Right, that's where you had to run everything. Now that's gone. You don't have to worry about running IIS. You don't have to worry about configuring it. The ASP.NET team has written like 3 different variants of servers because they're tired of IIS themselves. It's the whole point of it is that it doesn't mean that IIS sucks. It doesn't mean that Windows Server sucks. What it means is you don't need it to run your C# code. You need a box of some kind that can run something that you can put C# on. That's the whole idea. They're trying to make C# and .NET great in its own right. Where does it run? Wherever you want it to run. Doesn't matter. But C# is great, and it's going to work wherever you want it to work, and that's the whole point. So if I go down here, I got this slide from some buddies of mine. This is just kind of highlighting the breakdown, where they're kind of going with it, and this is the kind of the key thing to highlight too. You can see ASP.NET 4.6, you got ASP.NET Core, which is built on top of Core 1.0. This is constantly evolving. This is the framework is not at parity. You can't convert everything over. The general story when it comes to like, hey, I have a .NET, regular .NET app. Should I move it to Core? The answer is no. Don't ever think of doing that for now. There is a long way to go before it's going to be at a point where, hey, you should start migrating your apps over. They're continuing support for regular .NET. That's not going away. But .NET Core has a lot of growing up to do and a lot of evolution to happen before it's going to be ready for converting your apps over. If you're stuck writing something brand new, something to consider, something small. If you're going to write the next big cool thing, maybe you want to write something a little bit more stable, and regular .NET is probably your best bet. I'm going to keep going. TypeScript. And I have to put this slide in there because I got my demo already. I was a little proud of myself, and then version 2 came out a week ago. So that happened. A lot of people are saying, and I've heard this from numerous sources, that TypeScript might be the best thing to come out of Microsoft in the last 15 years. And for those of you that are not familiar with TypeScript, it is a language that is based on JavaScript. But don't be mad at it yet. It's a superset of JavaScript, so it's evolved JavaScript. So JavaScript has become this language that works anywhere, web, desktop, anywhere. And the problem with JavaScript is that it's JavaScript, and it has a lot of issues. And it's getting better as the standards evolve, but we have to deal with old legacy browsers. We have to deal with the fact that no one wants to adopt the newer standards, or when they do, you know, it's just a bunch of people arguing in a room for a year, and they're like, great, now we'll have vars and lets. It's like, great. I'm glad you had that argument for 2 years. Now what? This is Microsoft's open source project that allows you to take a strongly typed language with generics. It has, I would call it, it feels a lot like C# with JavaScript roots, and allows you to compile it to some variant of JavaScript. So when I say variant of JavaScript, I mean based on your browser support or what platform you're writing it for. You can write it for ECMAScript 3, so it can run in very old browsers, or the newer versions of ECMAScript 5 or 6. You can use different flavors of module standards. It has a compiler, or in this case, a transpiler. So it takes your code, follows it through, and out comes JavaScript. And you can debug it just like you would regular JavaScript. It links back to your TypeScript through source maps. This is a whole talk all by itself. But the new version has a lot of really cool improvements. For those of you that are vaguely even familiar with TypeScript, some of the things they've changed, you no longer need to worry about definitely typed or TSD or what's the other one, typings. You can use them still, but they've also added a user called types in the NPM, so getting your definition files, which is, think of it as your interfaces for whatever JavaScript library you want, is available publicly through the NPM. So there's no extra software that needs to be installed to run on your dev box. You just need to run Node, which you need to run TypeScript, which isn't that bad. There's a bunch of new transpiler updates and getting new options and features in there. Glob support for tsconfig, so when you're selecting files, you don't have to use full URLs, you can use just globs. And language updates, things like read-only, privacy modifiers, optional parameters. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I was reading it today. There's so much content. I'll take a quick look at a project that I have. So we go to File, we'll go open a folder. Let's go to one of my projects. Finder game. I don't think this works, but I can only show you the code. Open. What's that? This is an old laptop I got for $300, so yeah.
That's another good thing to say. Actually, I can run Windows C# on it.
That's actually a really good point. Like, it doesn't consume a lot of space. Like, this machine is adequated and old from a development machine standard, but yet I can compile C# code. I'm running a web server in the background. I can do all this because I'm using. Generally, I use Microsoft tooling. Like, it's just a weird thing. That's a really good point, George. Like, this machine is not meant for real development. Anyone that has real development has this machine that has like basically a diesel engine underneath it, or has a MacBook that is very beautiful and has like, oh look, it looks through time. That's how it's so fast. Mine is not that, but it can run really fast. And I'm running it on Linux, and Linux is just optimal, right? Not to say that like Windows is bad, but it's the fact that I can do all my Microsoft development on Linux. I'm like, I need Windows at home to play video games. That's what I use it for now. So if I go to script, just show you a TypeScript file. I always think this is weird because you look at this, static get, I got a bunch of static, I got my public static properties, I got a private variable, I got a static variable, I got a constructor. This is what I mean by it's JavaScript or C# with JavaScript roots. It's like C# and JavaScript kind of got together, had a kid, and this was TypeScript. And this is the kind of thing you get. Like, this gets compiled down into my compiler configured. I have it just outputting the whole thing. So this is, I have it compiling all my libraries together. If I look at my game, this is the JavaScript it actually produces. So you can see I'm using classes. I'm using things that you're probably not familiar with in the context of JavaScript. Yes, in ECMAScript, modern, you can use classes. There's one day they swear they're going to get privacy modifiers in there. But in this case, if you're used to C# like coding contexts or coding components, it's all in TypeScript. And the big one is generics. I can't emphasize that enough. Generics are awesome. And I miss generics. And then I get TypeScript and I get generics again. And I can run it wherever I want to run JavaScript. So again, fully open source language and compiler and everything. Go to typescriptlang.org. Check it out. You can actually play with it in the browser because it's a JavaScript language. So you write TypeScript on the left, and out comes the JavaScript on the right, and it runs it. It's fantastic. It's a really great way to do programming. And if you're using Visual Studio proper, you get some really cool stuff out of the box, like IntelliSense, all that kind of stuff. And it ties into your regular JavaScript APIs. Because it's smart enough to know, like, oh, you're using these libraries, and oh, you're using this. Well, here's your IntelliSense, so I don't have to sit on a bunch of web pages and look through all this stuff. It's really, really nice. All right. How are we doing for time? Oh, we're good for time. I have about an hour of content, so we'll be good. We'll be on time. I set the hard limit on the timeline, so. PowerShell. How many people here have used PowerShell? So there you go. I like skipped PowerShell. I was like, nah, I don't need that. And then I was forced to learn like Linux shell at work, and I got like right into it. But then PowerShell had this big announcement saying, hey, the new version is cross-compatible. It's fully open source. It's on GitHub. And not only that, but it works on Linux now and Mac. So that's the thing. So I thought I would, like, that's got to be sucky and painfully difficult to do, right? So I'm going to do something a little bit more meta. So I could install PowerShell 6 is the version that's cross-compatible. But it's in alpha state. You don't install alpha software on your dev box. Don't do it unless you hate everyone that you work with, because that's what's going to happen. It's going to do something wrong to your machine. So instead, I installed it on Docker. So if you're not familiar with Docker, it's a container system. Just to kind of summarize, it's a container system that runs a little VM in a container, and I can execute code through that VM. So it doesn't know about the machine that it's being hosted on, but I can spin these up really easily and quickly to run alpha software without it ever having to worry about touching my machine, except for the parts that I give it permission to touch. So if I start this, enter, there we go. Don't look at my password.
Note how it doesn't even show us the number of characters in your password.
Yeah, I know. Okay. So did I start it? I don't think I did. So let's see, Docker.
Oh, you probably want service Docker.
Oh yeah, there we go. Service, Docker, start.
Just write it down.
There we
There we
go.
go, yeah, okay. So now if I do Docker images, you can see up there, I've got a number of images. One of them is the stable Ubuntu 16.04 image of PowerShell. And I also have Ubuntu, the version of Ubuntu that I'm running on this machine is 16.04, but I'm running a container with the same version of the operating system in a little box with PowerShell installed. Yes?
So this image is an official one, or
Yep.
it's just like
Absolutely. One of their deployment options, and Microsoft, like .NET does this as well, is when they do a release, part of their release cycle is they have to do a Docker image as part of it. So you can pull it into Docker, experiment, and then if it doesn't work or you think it sucks, you've never installed it. It just sits in Docker, you just delete that image and it goes away forever. That's real? I know, right? So it's a weird thing that they're doing this. Like, again, George highlights a really good point. Like, is this the real Microsoft that's doing this? It is. And it's making them accountable. And they've become, like, the product teams, though, is what's interesting. The product teams have become accountable to their users. On the development front, I'm not going to say this for, like, this is going to work for Microsoft Office, but it's going to definitely work on the sense of the development team. Because developers building software for developers. So maybe, crazy idea, the marketing people should take a break, and then developers can talk to the developers and be like, hey, what do you think about this thing? And then they go, it sucks. And they go, oh, should I fix it? And they go, yes. And then they do. And then everyone's happy. It took them 20 years to get there, but they got there. That's what's important.
I think it also has to do something to that Steve Ballmer's no longer in charge.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think it has to be, because the new guy, he has so many new ideas, and it's like throwing all the ideas, you know, to the wall. Some of them is going to stick, some of them are not going to stick. So we're guessing that the good ones are going to stick.
Well, you know, an interesting fact about Satya Nadella is that, from what the word is he was, when Steve Ballmer quit, he was number 6 on the list of CEOs. Everyone else turned them down. They got to Satya. Satya is a developer. He made a piece of software called Windows NT. Anyone remember Windows NT? It was like the good version of Windows back in the day. Then it went away. It kind of got woven into everything else. But it didn't actually go away. There's this other thing they have now. Maybe you've heard of it. Windows Azure. It's kind of a big deal now. All of that is based on Satya's code. So he invented Microsoft Cloud. That's his claim to fame. Like, that's where he comes from. He's a developer through and through. And he's a cloud developer back when cloud was not even a thing. Cloud really meant fluffy things in the sky. Now it means not that at all. So yeah, this is a weird thing where let's embrace open source. Let's embrace the fact that we're a software company, and he's making these dramatic changes. And you can see it inside when you talk to these product teams, and you see some of the actions that are coming out of it. Like, there's no way this would have ever gotten, like, get Steve Ballmer to sign off. I'm like, we paid those guys, what, $3 million? Yeah, throw all that onto the competitor's source code repository in the free market. Let's see what, or in the free world, that'll work. And here we are, a Docker image that's open source with PowerShell. So let's get to this demo here. I'm just gonna go to my slides real quick. And I'm gonna open up, oh, come on, I want pop-ups. Everyone secretly wants pop-ups. Sure, now it doesn't work. Well, this is supposed to have slide notes on it, but apparently it does not want to work anymore. It worked last night, but that's okay. So here's what we'll do. We will try doing this. So I'll do Docker rm. Docker run rm. Oh, run. Sorry. I've really got booze on the brain. Remove. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to delete the image as soon as it's done running. I want to do PowerShell. PowerShell. And I want the tag, which is stable Ubuntu 16.4. And I'm going to do, what is it? So I say that again? Oh, okay. I'm just trying to think of a PowerShell. I'm going to write output. Hello, everyone. I am Linux on a Linux and a PowerShell. Question mark. That's actually adequate.
Are you executing PowerShell command from this?
Yes. So what I'm doing, for those that aren't familiar, I am taking this command line app that is running on my machine. I'm piping that into this PowerShell container, which is running another copy of Ubuntu with PowerShell installed. It is executing that on that little virtual machine and taking the output and dumping it out on here. You can see, well, you can't really, it's kind of cut off.
Bash interpreted the quotes, so it didn't pass the quotes.
I actually, when I do it this way too, I was trying to experiment with this. This is, again, I also chalk this up to, this is also alpha software. I cannot get it to not appear on here in multiple lines. I can get other stuff to work, but just not specifically the right output command. So I can't replicate that anywhere if it's installed. I think it might be a Docker thing. But again, alpha software, right? I'm not going to sit here and debugging it because I'm not that guy. I'm just happy that it does something. The first time I got to throw a bunch of errors, I'm like, woo, look, PowerShell errors. I know those really well. So at the end of the day, this is kind of neat, the fact that it's running on Linux. Now, they don't have all the modules uploaded and converted. Like I said, it's alpha 10. Like this is new, really, really new. But they do have one of the bigger components called the DSC, the Desired State Configuration Module, which allows you to do things like configure users, install software on remote machines. You can do that from a Linux box to another Linux box, or a Windows box to another Linux box that has PowerShell installed. So you have all this kind of stuff working together. It's kind of neat. So that's where they're going with PowerShell. It's been a really good infrastructure management platform, and now it's just going to soak in all the Linux goodness at the same time. So you can manage a network with Windows machines and Linux machines and cloud-based machines, all from a single language, which is weird. I'm not going to say it's cool. It is cool, but it's just weird. Like, someone somewhere died to make this happen. Like, that's how I'm convinced. Like, Steve Ballmer clearly left, and they're just like, oh, finally. Let's have some good ideas, people. Let's sit down and have some good ideas. Remember that box that we hid under the desk from Steve? Let's bring that back out. Let's keep going here. So it's an alpha, so if you're going to use it, again, like, beware. There's a couple of smaller ones. Node/Chakra Core. Does anyone know what Chakra is? Has anyone heard of Chakra? Not the chi thing, but the actual Chakra. Yeah? No? Chakra is the brand new JavaScript engine that Microsoft wrote from the ground up. So does anyone know what the Universal Windows Applications are? Or UWP is the cool acronym they now have for Windows 10 apps. You know the apps? That's a UWP app. That's actually all JavaScript, all of it. All runs with Chakra Core. It's really fast. It's this new JavaScript. It's a new JavaScript engine that they wove into Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge, Windows. It's part of the whole platform. It's a really, really big integral part to the operating system now. It's on GitHub because why wouldn't you put your operating system components on the open source web? That makes sense. Linux has been doing it. It seemed to work out well for them. But they've also done this thing called Node Chakra Core, which is, for those that are Node.js people, Node has traditionally always been run on the Google JavaScript engine called V8. It's been woven into it. Now that didn't mean that you caught the newest version of the V8 engine whenever Google did an upgrade. They have a 6-week release cycle. They were not upgrading the Node.js version every 6 weeks. Node would decide this is the version of V8 we're going to use, and they're going to go with it. So they're actually usually we're about 1 or 2 versions behind. So it was slower, missing different JavaScript syntax that was updated in the modern version. So there's always this complaint saying, hey, why don't we decouple that? And everyone's like, nah, it's a lot of work. Let's not do that. Who's going to want to do that? Well, the Node Chakra team did, or the Chakra Core team did, and that's what they did. They took Node.js, they forked it, and they jammed in the Chakra Core engine. And so that opened up a whole bunch of doors, right? Because now you're not forced to use Google's JavaScript engine. You can use Microsoft's. But that also opened up one for SpiderMonkey, which is Firefox, I believe. And there's another one that's Opera is called something, I don't know, whatever they use. But you can use whatever JavaScript interpreter you want. And you can put that into Node. Or if you want your own JavaScript interpreter for some reason, it's actually they have one available, and it's open source. And again, this is a huge fundamental part of Windows, like proper. Your UWP, every Windows Store app runs some variety of Chakra. It just needs to do that. It's part of your OS, and now it's just out there in the open source world, which is a huge step in Microsoft's madness in terms of, let's put a piece of the operating system out there. There's no way anyone would ever do that a year ago, or a year and a half ago, because this was about a year ago they did this. So not a lot of people know about this, and I like to highlight it. So it's really kind of something neat. SQL Server. Oh, yeah.
So does that mean you have access to all the newer JavaScript APIs or
Yes.
specifications?
If you use that version of Node, yes.
Is that the only benefit you get?
No, you also get the performance enhancements they make, any bug fixes they put in. So both V8 and Chakra have a very quick release cycle on their JavaScript engine because it's their bread and butter, right? They're very iterative and they have a very good process for it. It's just that you get a lot of performance enhancements out of it, and Node for a long time was suffering from that. When Node was originally written by that one guy, I can't remember his name right now, he just took the V8 engine because it made sense. It was the one that was available. It was the most accessible. You just put it in there. But then JavaScript got faster and bigger, and the browser wars continued, and JavaScript engines had to get faster and faster, but Node couldn't. You can't just constantly take the heart out of a framework and be like, just put this new one in, I'm sure it's fine. And then 6 weeks later, go to your enterprise, pick a new JavaScript engine and jam it into all your new apps. I'm sure it's totally cool. That's never going to happen, right? So now that you have that option to control it for yourself. And Chakra Core is really fast. Like it's V8 comparable fast. So you get a lot of the new features in there, and you can configure it how you want and all that kind of stuff. So there is some benefits to it from a speed perspective, because now you get Node.js and the version of Java or the JavaScript engine you want, rather than being forced to use one that's 2 years old. SQL Server. I highlighted this. Again, WTF is my keyword today. SQL Server on Linux. Get a real look at SQL Server on Linux. This was announced in March. It's not officially up, but you can get a private beta look at this. This is having SQL Server being hosted on a Linux box. And I want to highlight how broken of an idea this is, because like one of the big pieces of Microsoft, has anyone had to deal with SQL Server licensing ever? 1, 2. So you guys know, like the checkbook that gets involved in that conversation, it's very insane. Like Microsoft's rich not because they make great software, it's because they really did great licensing schemes. And SQL Server is amazing at how they know how to license. They license by the core, and we're talking like the quote I got was 16K per core. Like think about that on an octo-core desktop. Like that's just all kinds of money. So this is now going to run on SQL Server. Now that's not to say that I'm not sure about the licensing setup for that, or it's going to go open source. I really somehow doubt that. But at the end of the day, you can at least host it without a Windows Server license. You can host it wherever you want to host it, and they're going to be going that route. So this is just something that I wanted to point out. This is weird. This is weird, and it's happening. So took a screenshot because I'm pretty confident. Like next year, they're going to be like, we didn't say nothing. You know, that's what I'm waiting for. So it's all on GitHub now.
So it's also documenting.
What's that?
It's also preventing the Docker image.
Hypothetically, yeah. Right now, it's not even like they don't even have an access point to it. You have to ask for permission to go see it. But I would assume that because Docker has become part of their mantra, it seems, because not even the Microsoft people want to trust installing it on their local machines. We run everything in Docker because if it implodes, it'll make a black hole over there, and that's okay. So I'm pretty confident that we'll have a Docker image, or someone will have it quick.
If it can deploy with a Docker, it saves lots of time to config just with
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
nightmare to config.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yep, exactly. It makes things cheaper. And on top of that, like, I love the idea that you can just deploy to a Linux image, right? Because they have those Windows images that are Docker compatible or whatever they want to call them. But again, most of Docker image stuff works on Linux. So just having all the pieces of software you care about. I don't care if it runs Windows under the hood. It makes no difference to me. So yeah, that's just one thing I wanted to point out. Services. We're doing on time. We're doing okay. I just want to kind of point this one out. This one, we can do a bit of a demo afterwards if we want to. I'm just going to kind of get through these last few slides. But this is the new TFS, okay? And I went to a project, it's on the web portal, I logged in. I wanted to create a new build, and I want to point out this one here is Gradle. This one here is Ant, that's Android stuff, that's Gulp. And that's build not on the top of the list. This is their new build platform. It supports anything and everything you can possibly think of. And I'm, again, going down that same route. Do you want software on the thing that you compute? Then we have that for you. And this is what they're providing. They're providing a platform agnostic thing. And there's actually, if I could see my notes, let's try this, see if my notes show up this time. Oh, look at that. You can see them too? Oh, there we go. Get a project example. I got this as an example from a Microsoft buddy. This is a project they created that is an enterprise level application that uses Linux, Java, Apache, MongoDB, creates a web front end, has an integration service, has a whole series of interconnected parts, and they can deploy it with JUnit tests on TFS. And you get all the stats and the power you get from TFS with all your JUnit stuff and all your Java stuff, and it's all there, debugging the whole thing. It's weird, again, the fact that but they don't care. The ALM team, the Visual Studio team, they don't care what language you're in. They care that you want to write code. They care that you want to have a good process. They care that you have the right tools to do the right job. If you want to use Java, cool. You want to use Gradle? Awesome. You want to use Maven? Sure. Whatever you want to use. They provide that solution. This is a good example of just something really big. I thought about trying to build this thing, but then I realized that's effort and I'm lazy. So I thought I should have a GitHub page instead. But this is kind of a really cool, again, mind shift. Because if I go back to that slide, like I said, which one is it? Oh, no, wait. There we go. Oh, wait. I'm failing at all of the things. There. Okay. You have and Gradle, run JavaScript, all these pieces are in there. And again, it's if you're familiar with old TFS, it still feels the same, but it's faster, it's more accessible. I want to say that, but the power's all still there. Another thing to highlight too is if you're an Eclipse developer, there is a free TFS or VSTS plugin that they have that makes it feel just like regular Visual Studio proper. So if you have Visual Studio developers and Eclipse developers, they can talk. They can share work items, and they can share builds, and they can see build statuses, and they can do all that stuff together. Probably better off editing your Java code in Eclipse and your C# code in Visual Studio, but at the same time you can still do that kind of stuff. So there you go. That's one I wanted to point out. Microsoft Flow is another thing that's kind of under the radar. Anyone heard of, what is it called? If, then,
If this, then that.
if, yes, there you go. If, then, IFTTT, right? Yeah, it's 5 letters. Whatever. If this, then that. There we go. Got it. This is their kind of variant of that, but I would say it's a lot more geared towards business and development and leveraging it from a logical business point of view. IFTTT is fantastic. It has a lot more integrations, has a lot more components. This is a workflow engine that is cloud-based, and it ties things together. And by things, I literally mean things. Do you want get a push notification from your favorite blog, and then when you commit to Git, it sends an email to your boss to let them know something? You can build that now. It sounds really weird, but there's a lot of really cool integrations. If you're using things like Salesforce, Google Docs, it has a lot of integration for that. Office 365, clearly, GitHub, MailChimp, SharePoint, there's all kinds of stuff in here. It also has just the basic, like the bare bones stuff. If you want to use HTTP requests, when this happens, fire an HTTP request so I can use that webhook on a private server that I have somewhere over there. You can do that. It's in preview right now, but there's a lot of cool stuff and something that I tinker with. I haven't done anything really productive with it. I had it doing something like, whenever I made a commit, I tweeted to an account that I don't actually have. I have it locked down so no one can see it. I just wanted to see if it would work, and it did. Every time I committed something, I tweeted. I was like, great. I don't have a use for a workflow engine, but I know I have in the past, and they didn't have something like this. So it's kind of neat to see this kind of thing existing. And again, web-based, kind of works everywhere. Works in your browser, so that's fantastic. I'm going to highlight Office 365 for 2 reasons. One, there's a bunch of weird stuff. This is my Office 365 E1 account. I pay $7 a month for it, or $9 a month for it. I got this thing called Planner. I got a thing called Sway. I've got all these pieces. All this stuff works in the browser, including Word, PowerPoint, OneNote, all this stuff. All works in the browser. I can save, edit documents in my browser, so I can use it anywhere I want. I don't like the Office client generally because I don't need it all that often. And when I do, I just need to make a couple of changes to a document or something like that. I can go to the browser and just make the edits in the browser. The second piece of Office 365 is that it's actually a development platform that is, again, platform agnostic. Local developer, does anyone know Eric Legault? No? You should, because Eric's awesome, okay? Eric rocks out, literally. He is an Outlook MVP, and he created more recently a Office add-in, which is think of it as an extension. But what's neat about it is he created this. I installed it in Outlook on my Office 365 account, and then all of my Outlook clients, the ones that were locally installed as well, had the add-in installed. So you think about that, it's a weird thing, right? Like I can install an app, one thing, and then all of my computers that have Microsoft Office on, as long as I'm logged in, have my apps or my add-ins, things that are making me more productive, things that are tying LinkedIn in or tying Yammer or whatever it is you use. Now, given that sounds like a really weird niche case, there's a market for that. And it's something that they're developing actively. They also have a full UI framework that is, again, works in the web and it works on Microsoft Office proper, right? Like you can have all these things to integrate together. It works in Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, all the major flavors. And you can just install it once and it's everywhere you want. So it's a really neat development platform that's not getting a lot of notes because it's Office, right? Like, developing for Office has always sucked. And this is better. It's more JavaScripty, it's more web-based, it's way more down that line. But again, it's not COM objects, it's not all the other horrible stuff they used to do to make Office add-ins work. It's a lot better. Still room for improvement, but if you're a web developer, if you know web stuff, it's right up your alley. That's what I find when I talk to Office people about it. Their web development skills aren't super sharp because they never had to worry about it, and now their platform is going to be JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So it's just something to highlight. Again, it works anywhere as long as you have a browser. I'm going to point out Windows Azure. What I've done in this screenshot is I've taken a picture of the VMs that I can create on the fly when I look up Ubuntu server. I can look at the newest version of that. I have Docker on Ubuntu server. So if I want to install a Docker server with or Ubuntu server with Docker on it, I have an image for that. They have a lot of pre-built images on Azure, and there's a lot of other services. All these things on the left. There's a key for authentication. There's VMs. There's databases. And by databases, I don't just mean SQL Azure. I also mean stuff like MongoDB. I mean MySQL. I mean, I think Postgres is even on there. All of these different variants of SQL. It's all there, and they have them available in the cloud. And I point this out because Azure is, again, its own platform. It's its own thing. So you can just go on there, use your machine, and it works. Do you need a web browser to configure everything? No. A lot of people complain about the portal because it's changing and it's new and it's big. There is an NPM command line terminal and there's a PowerShell module, and there's most recently, I think there's a Python one coming out or something.
Yes,
like that,
the
right?
new CLI.
Yeah, the new CLI is Python. Like, explain that to me. Like that is something I'm like, yeah, you know what? They haven't done Python. Ha! And here we are. Everybody has Python. That's the thing. That's what they're going for. Lowest common denominator. Do you have a Python? Do you have Python installed on your machine? If you are not Windows, you have probably said yes. If you are Windows, you probably had to install it at some point because something broke and they said you need Python to fix it.
Actually, you don't need a photo. You can do everything on the MacBook and OS X with the command line from the terminal. Do provisioning,
Yep.
virtual machine, shut down something, start a website, all
From the terminal.
Linux machine or so on.
Yeah, well, I actually did it from my Windows box. I actually found it faster to start and stop virtual machines and web servers from the command line using the Node.js command line tool, because there was a Node.js tool for it. It was just faster. I had a little script that would like execute, and it was done, rather than like log in. What's my password? No, and then click, refresh, thinking. It goes way faster with the command line. Just it's really quick and quick and easy. Okay. So in summary, our goal was to take a look at the new world of Microsoft development. Do you think you saw something new? Did someone see something new here from Microsoft they didn't expect to see? Only 2 people, 3. That's a win as far as I'm concerned, because one person at least. I have a low bar for success. A lot of you were shy, and that's cool. But this is weird, okay? I did a Microsoft demo without opening Visual Studio proper once. And I showed you code, I showed you a bunch of source code, I showed you all kinds of stuff. We edited some stuff, we ran machines, we compiled stuff, we did all kinds of weird stuff. We didn't once open Visual Studio proper, which is weird. And I'm saying that because I still look at this stuff and I forget. Because I'm like, yeah, man, I'm totally cross-platform guy now. It's like, yeah, but you're still Microsoft guy. It's like, yeah. And that's not a bad thing. The stuff we're doing is cool. And it's about time they got there, to be fair. But it's really neat to see it. And the big thing that I emphasize a lot is this isn't just some sort of hipster thing. Okay, I work in a big enterprise, and I'm actually doing this exact same talk for my group in a month. And the thing I want to emphasize that they haven't forgotten where they came from. There is a prescribed solution that they've just broken it up. So when they start talking about like, oh, .NET Core is cool, and oh, I'm running JUnit tests, and oh, here's the new cool thing that I'm doing in PowerShell on GitHub, and it starts to freak people out in big enterprise, and it does. Like I've shown people this, and I had my boss go like, that's cool. So have you not talked about that with your coworkers? Because you could keep not telling them that. That's good. That's kind of where it goes, right? Like understand there is that full scale solution. It does have the full Microsoft enterprise support, and they haven't forgotten about enterprise, but they've just broken it up to appeal to all varieties of developers. Where Microsoft developers can look at tools they probably wouldn't have looked at before, and non-Microsoft developers can look at tools that they would have never considered before because they didn't want to run Windows, which is fair. You're seeing, like, if you watch a Microsoft conference, I would be surprised to see a PC up on stage. I always see Macs. Like Macs, like as soon as they said like, hey, by the way, we don't care about PCs, it's like everyone just like ran to the Apple store from Microsoft campus, like, give me all of the machines. And that's what they've done. Like that's what they've got all over the place now. So something that's kind of neat there. So again, the takeaway, I hope you guys, I don't even know, this is a weird sentence. Just understand what I just said a minute ago about that it is the whole big picture still being captured, just they're breaking it up a lot smaller so they can be a lot more agile, a lot more responsive. And to be fair, the walls have been broken down. Like if you want to make a comment about how .NET is going, you can go to the Google Hangout that they do weekly and sit there and watch Scott Hanselman and Damian Edwards go like, so I broke the build last week, and then they start swearing a bunch, and they go, okay, and then you can comment, and they're like, who are you, and why do you have this comment? And they address it, but be prepared to hold your ground, because like they are expecting you to really know what you're talking about, because you can contribute. Like they have accepted contributions in the .NET that are public. People that aren't getting paid are contributing fixes. The Roslyn C# compiler had a ton of new pieces, a bunch of pull requests, and they accepted a bunch of them to optimize it. That was faster. Like they're just, again, this is not crazy for anyone who's been in open source world, but for Microsoft, like this is going into a product that they now support on that big enterprise scale. So it's a weird thing because it's going to take a long time for enterprise to shift on this, but eventually it's going to come because they're killing the old stuff slowly but surely. They're supporting it, but it's going to go away eventually, but they're keeping all those pieces are still there. What we're all used to in .NET is still all there. Don't get freaked out by it, but you can tell your coworkers, don't get freaked out. Just deep breath, create a GitHub account, and just start from there. So this is the fun fact I wanted to add. This is from a place called Octoverse. Organizations with the most open source contributors. This is on all of GitHub. Microsoft is number 1. That's weird. They have more open source contributors than anyone else. Than Facebook, Docker, Angular, Google, Atom, Apache.
Who did this?
This is Octoverse. Octoverse is from GitHub. It's just a stats crunching website. That's messed up. I don't know, like the amount of money that they're funneling in, because you totally know that's an old business mentality. Like the lines of code produced that's their asset. We're going to hold on to this, and it's going to be our treasure. It's gold. Others kind of like whatever, write it, put it out there. The money comes in with the support contracts. The money comes in with developers using it and selling those products, and we get a kick on the App Store or whatever licenses they do end up buying. That's their model, and this is insane. Like, and this is does everyone know what Codeplex is?
Yeah.
Remember Codeplex? So do they. Codeplex still exists. They just don't use it, it seems. And by they, I mean Microsoft, the guys that own Codeplex. Like, they just gave up on that. Like, nah, it's fine.
Google has Google Code before.
I know, but at least they killed it.
Yeah.
Like, Microsoft doesn't even have the nerve to be like, nah, we gave it Git support, and we're kind of like, we're going to go over to those guys. It's fine, no, it's you guys, you do you. TFS, I don't know. That's what they're going to say. Another fun fact. This one's a little bit more. Repositories with most open source contributors. This one down here, Microsoft Visual Studio Code. And I want to point out how weird that is that the other Visual Studio has the 6th most number of open source contributions for a development tool that is one of the main code editors for all of Microsoft. This is used all over there. Like, they use it themselves, and it's got a ton of open source contributions. This is a weird world we now live in, and this is just one of those things that is there. And I wanted to share that because I read it and go like, this is messed up. This is messed up. I wanted to share that. I like sharing weird things. Our plan tonight was tools, language platforms, and stuff, and services. So again, these slides are all available on my GitHub account. I'll put it up on Slack and on Twitter later. And next steps for you, because you have homework now. Okay? I'm the president of the user group. I can assign homework. That's what Amir told me, but he lives in California, so he's probably just laughing at me. Download Visual Studio Code. This is free. It works literally anywhere. Just download it. It's a free download. Try it out. If you have and just see what you think. And like I said, edit. The way I got it with Visual Studio Code was I edited config files. Replace Notepad++. That's it. See what you can do with it. If you're going to write a little bit of web code, it's another good spot to start. Web stuff is really nice on there. Some C# stuff on there is also really nice too. You do get your IntelliSense. You do get a lot of all those cool features that you're used to in Visual Studio proper. It just doesn't take 8 gigs of RAM. It takes half a gig, which is nice. It's still really big because it's based on another open source project from GitHub, which is another weird story, but that's a different problem. Another one, git clone any of these repositories: PowerShell, TypeScript, Shock Record, Visual Studio Code, .NET Core, ASP.NET Core. By git clone, I mean literally take the source code for the favorite framework that you've been using forever and now just change it, add stuff. Call it .NET not Core, I don't know. .NET Dave, that's another good one. Change stuff, just mess around with it, because I want to have people appreciate how bizarre that world is now, where you can take Microsoft's code and change it for your own purposes. That's just a weird world we live in. This is another way to get started. Does everyone here have an old computer sitting in a box somewhere they haven't used in like 10 years? Yeah? Put like some weird version of Ubuntu on it or some flavor of Linux. I say start with Ubuntu because it's like the Windows of Linux. It's really easy to get started, and just mess around with it. Just see what you can do with it. Pull down some source code, do some editing. There's some lightweight versions. If it has 2 gigs of RAM or roughly 2 gigs of RAM, you're probably gonna run fine. Like, it'll run well enough. So you can do some stuff with that. I have an old machine that has the hard drive being held in by painter's tape. I haven't replaced the painter's tape. It's coming. It slid out last night. It fell out again. The hard drive should probably have screws in it, but I don't know what happened to that. But I put a Linux on it, and it still works. And you can do something, make a little server out of it, tinker with some stuff. Just mess around with it and see what you can do with it now, because you can do a lot of cool stuff with your Microsoft development skills. And the last one, I am drinking that Kool-Aid, man. Like, VSTS is cool. I didn't highlight this when I was showing it. Visual Studio Team Services is free for up to 5 contributors. Limited Git repositories that are private. You get, I think, 120 minutes of build server time, because they have hosted build servers, but you can tie them into your own if you have your own. But you get it all for free as long as you have a Microsoft account. Just log in and create as many things as you want and just mess around with it. I use it for Git. Now, is it as good as GitHub for development purposes? I would say no. I like GitHub for what it is, but there's certain projects that I want to have that I don't want in open source. I want them locked away because I'm too ashamed of them, or possibly this is the thing that's going to make me $1 billion. I'm doing the old Microsoft thing, or I'm going to keep my code in a box. Either way, you can have some cool stuff in there. And I'm a very big fan of this. The team is fantastic. It's amazing to see the ALM MVPs in action. All they do is they get in a room, they're like, here's our new build server, and then they go, boo! And I literally mean they boo the team. Like 100 very loud, angry men booing a development team that invited them to the building. It's very, very hostile. It's lovely. But it's made the product a lot better, and I strongly suggest you check it out. It's free, and it's enterprise ready. A lot of enterprises are actually starting to get onto this. Other resources, ASP.NET Monsters. If you're looking at .NET Core or .NET, like the newer stuff of .NET, the ASP.NET Monsters cover that stuff. They're colleagues of mine, but definitely they actually helped contribute some of the answers I had about .NET Core to this presentation. Western Devs, again, shameless self-promotion on my part. The blogs are there. We have a lot of good content. A lot of us are Microsoft MVPs, but the more stuff we write about, it's getting less and less Microsoft-y. Like the other ASP.NET MVP guy, he just wrote a post about running Nginx with a bunch of like Node.js stuff. Like they didn't even talk about C#. It was just a bunch of weird infrastructure stuff that I didn't know. You know Linux, you probably understood that way better than I would. And look at the Microsoft GitHub repositories, there's a ton of them. If you like MS Build is another open source project. Like, that's a thing. There's a ton of them. Like they're just open sourcing everything because they're like, it's fine. Windows is not open source yet. That we asked that question, like, why isn't it open source? And they're like, because they make a lot of money off of it. And it's like, that's fair. And they're also really ashamed of the build system, I'm pretty confident. So it's pretty messy code, I'm very sure of it, because the fact that System32 is still in Windows 10 says something. Questions? Yeah.
So everything behind it looks like it's more for people not used currently doing .NET and get it easier to end with the .NET work. And then while we are working on Visual Studio every day, we're probably not going to change much for now.
Yep. So that's a really good point. So the question, to repeat the question, and I'm going to summarize it, George, but a lot of the new stuff we're seeing here, it seems a lot more geared towards recruitment, essentially, attracting new developers to the Microsoft ecosystem versus like people that are used to working in Visual Studio every day, like Visual Studio proper. This doesn't seem that appealing to them. And to be fair, that's a huge thing, and it's been brought up a lot because there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of changes in .NET Core. The reason it's taken forever to get .NET Core to a release is of the internal conflict and the challenges, because originally it was just going to be ASP.NET Core, where ASP.NET was going to be the cross-platform thing. Turns out the ASP.NET team did like a little skunkworks Black Ops operation and rewrote like, haha, it's going to work on Linux now. And they're like, you did what? And so then the .NET team was just like, well, no, like we need to bring this back together. And so there's been a lot of restructuring and a lot of changes, but a lot of the developers have complained. A lot of developers that have been doing ASP.NET for a long time, and it's a fair complaint. Like, if you've been doing web forms for 15 years and it hasn't changed, like they've been updating it, and then they just simply say like, it's dead. Enjoy that. It's like, it's a bad day for you. And also the enterprise that built like $590 million worth of software on it. That's a bad day. So there's a lot of conversation about that. Like, they're trying to bridge that gap, and they've actually been a lot better at it, communicating like the stuff that I was saying, this is bleeding edge, do not think about converting all your apps right away, all that kind of stuff. They're saying the exact same thing. Like, this is something to know exists because it's coming. This is the future. But that doesn't mean that your stuff that you have now is going to start going away anytime soon. I figure the year that's going to be a big shift is 2020, because that's when Windows 7's extended service agreement for warranty ends, kind of like how Windows XP went away, and Windows Vista. Windows 7 has the same deadline in 2020. And guess what? They didn't do the same thing for Windows 10 or Windows 8. Those only had 2 years. So they changed the license agreement with Windows 8. That was a secret that no one found out about. So all the big enterprises are freaking out because they're getting phone calls. Hey, you're done that Windows XP upgrade? That's awesome. You got 3 or 4 years before we're killing out Windows 7. So that's a whole thing now too. But when that stuff shifts, a lot of the stuff is going to come down the pipe with Windows 10 or whatever flavor. Because they do have I didn't show this, Windows 10 has a Linux bash app, so you can run the Linux command line, which uses Ubuntu underneath the hood to interface with your file system on Windows. You can run bash script natively on a Windows box, and it's Microsoft supported, built by Ubuntu for Microsoft in Collaborate. It's just,
so horribly insecure. Please don't use it yet.
oh, it's a mess. It's a complete mess. To unlock it, you got to put your machine in developer mode, and you got to, because like, are you sure? Like, do you hate yourself a lot? Is that your problem? Like, do it on a VM. Do it on a VM. Tinker with it. I did. It was neat. But again, it's just one of those things. Know that it's there. It's neat to see what they're doing. There's a lot of shift. And like I say, go back and look at some old Linuxy stuff that, like I say old Linuxy stuff because that's what I call it. Like, my group was like Solaris, which is it's Unix. They correct me like, this is Linux. They're like, no, it's not.
It is very not.
See? That's what they said. It's very not. I'm like, I don't understand. Windows this. Where's my GUI? And they're just like, shut up, kid. It was fantastic. It was a great meeting. I have very low standards, you see. They told me to shut up twice. That was it. That was great. But yeah, so that stuff is coming, and like I say, they are addressing that. So I think, like honestly, with whenever version 2 comes around, I think that's where you're going to start to see your ubiquity between the legacy stuff and the new stuff. and you're going to be able to start, that migration path isn't there yet. And one day it will be, and there, because that is a challenge they have, but something that they're going to address as time goes on. Because right now it's just appealing to, I would call it the hipster crowd. So, any other questions? There are no bad questions.
I heard the term this week, .NET Standard. Do you know what that's all about?
Yes, the .NET Standard is an open standard they're releasing for .NET Core, and it's supposed to identify what libraries and APIs are available. And that's how I understand it. So, for those of you that are, if you're familiar with web standards are very similar in that sense, where they have a group of people together, and they say, okay, this is what JavaScript is. This is what JavaScript is going to be. And wow, what have I done?
It hadn't actually quite launched.
Oh, okay. Well, I got there fast enough, and then now we have questions. So .NET Standard is that exact thing where now they've made this thing open source. One of the big questions they had was like, well, what's going to prevent you from breaking everything, or what's going to prevent you from doing this, that, or the other? And at the end of the day, they have the .NET Foundation, which is not owned by Microsoft. It's a separate corporate entity, part of the Microsoft Open Foundation, which is legally separate, so the investors don't have control over it in the literal sense. And the .NET Foundation is part of that. They're defining the .NET Standard, so they're going to say these are the libraries, these are the APIs, and that way other languages can implement the .NET Standard. So you could hypothetically take Erlang, Shane's favorite language, and you can just create the .NET Standard for it. And that way it works. And here's the standard that goes with it. So it's going to be this evolving standard. When something breaks, it's going to be a known thing, like it'll be a group decision. And the people that are on the .NET Foundation are not Microsoft people. Like there's a ton of groups. Like we're talking PayPal, Walmart I think is in there somewhere. The Node.js Foundation is also somewhere linked. Red Hat is on there. Like Red Hat sits on the board for that one. That happened. Like I don't even understand it. GitHub I think is a part of it. Like it's weird. So just to be clear, just to summarize what I just said, Red Hat and GitHub is going to tell Microsoft how to make .NET moving forward. That's how to summarize .NET Standard, I guess. It's just
Is that the same thing with .NET Core standard libraries and stuff?
Yep, that's where it's coming from. Because they did the standard libraries, and they said, well, why is it standard? Because .NET Standard from version 1 to version 4.5 are very different monsters. They've changed over the years, but it's been a dictatorship, right? Microsoft has said this is how it's going to work. We've made a breaking change. Now it's called version 3.5, and now we all celebrate. Moving forward, they want to prevent that. They want to make sure that when they're going to make a change, that everyone's on the same page, and that it's not going to have a huge impact. So, any other questions? Cool. All right. Well, that's that. Thanks, everyone. Like I said, join the Slack channel. Make sure you go there. The code thing. The day of code is October 22nd. There's also the next event will be October 16th. So that's coming up. But it'll be on Slack and all that right away, and that's gonna be the one on microservices. And like I say, find me on Slack or tweet me or whatever you have any questions. So thank you so much, everyone.